What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Path podcast. I'm Phil Perry. Another phenomenal guest lined up for us here today on this week's show. It's Jordan Reid of ESPN. He is part of the draft guru troika they have at the worldwide leader at this point in time with Mel Kiper, Todd McShay, and now Jordan Reid. He's sort of the new kid on the block, but this guy knows ball. Starting quarterback at the college level for 3 seasons. He is coached. He is now analyzing the draft in particular. This is going to be our first foray, really, into this year's draft class, because what's coming up this weekend, it's bowl season. And it's been bowl season, I understand that. But the most important bowls of the year are about to happen. So no better time for us to have Jordan on with us to tell us about the prospects that are going to be playing this weekend, guys that we should be keeping our eyes out for from a Patriots perspective, any corners this weekend that are going to be in action that you should be watching. How about tackles? Is it worth watching any of those guys maybe in the second half of the first round? Is that a position the Patriots could invest in? Receivers, maybe linebackers, really interesting to look at this Patriots roster and see who is and is not under contract for next season. And as we well know, as you have followed on this podcast, if you've been listening, if you've just been following the Patriots, period, under Bill Belichick, he is not above drafting for need. And there are plenty of positions on this Patriots roster when you look ahead to their 2022 setup that would qualify as needs. So we're going to get heavy into the draft and into some names that you're going to start to dig on, find some highlights online, Twitter, YouTube, they're everywhere now. It's a great time of year. It's really time for us, I think, to start looking ahead a little bit to the draft. But before we do that, let's look back very quickly and just talk about last week's episode with Ty Dunn. Great national football writer. One of the best that we have in the country, in my opinion. And he has been on this Bills team really all year long about how they are soft. And yet, did they look soft on Sunday last week against the New England Patriots? They did not. And it was not as though they beat the Patriots up on the ground. But boy, they leaned into their identity, that being we're going to be a team that throws the football. We're going to rely on our great quarterback. But they leaned into that identity and I think ratcheted up the toughness a little bit. This team clearly had something to play for, something to prove after being embarrassed at home just a couple weeks prior on Monday Night Football. Go to the second pass of the game, the first completion of the game for the Buffalo Bills. Little check down into the flat by Josh Allen to Devin Singletary. If you're the Patriots, you love that. You've been prepping all week to get Josh Allen to do that, to be a patient quarterback, to play a little bit more like Mac Jones than Josh Allen, who wants to uncork the ball deep down the field, use his big arm, use his athleticism. So that's what you've been planning for. That's what you wanted all week long leading up to this Bills game. Check it down. Make him be the patient quarterback. Make him throw it 3-4 yards down the field, rally to the football and tackle for maybe a gain of 5 or 6. Those are victories against Josh Allen in this passing offense. But what happens on that particular play? Devin Singletary catches it. He takes Kyle Duggar on a ride for about 7 yards. He runs through Dante Hightower, who comes over to make a hit on Singletary to try to bring him down or to push him out of bounds. And he ends up picking up 11 or 12 yards on a play that probably should have gone for 5. That right there was a statement. So good on the Bills for not being soft in that game on Sunday. And if you're the Patriots, this takes me back again to the immediate aftermath of that game in Buffalo, where that was the epitome of a toughness win, right? Run the football, stop the run, cover kicks. That's what the Patriots define toughness as. And I asked Bill Belichick after the fact, hey, you're doing those things pretty well right now. 7 wins in a row. What can you say about your team's toughness? He sort of shrugged his shoulders and said, you have ups and downs as far as those things go over the course of the year. And at the time, I thought it was just Bill Belichick giving the team what it needed at the podium, meaning this team was riding high. He wants to keep things mellow. He wants to keep things even keeled. When they were struggling, pump them up in the postgame press conference. When they're thriving, you don't need to do as much of that sort of thing. And I thought that was just Belichick doing business as he typically does it with us publicly in the media. It turns out this whole toughness thing is a week-to-week deal. You can be the toughest team in football one week, but if you don't bring it the next or 3 weeks later, after your bye, late in the season, in December, division championship game, you're going to get rolled. And the Patriots got rolled. I know the score was close, and they were a couple plays away from making that a closer game or maybe even winning the game. But they got dominated early. And there's plenty more that we can get into when it comes to that particular game in terms of team building, having the superhero quarterback versus the well-built roster and the deep roster. When you talk about defense, and can defense win at a high level late in the season? I think that's still to be determined. I thought it could. I thought the Patriots would have won at least one of these two games against the Colts and the Bills. I think their defense needs to carry them against good teams. What did Daniel Jeremiah tell us on this podcast just a few weeks ago? They can win at a high level. They can maybe even play into February if their defense continues to play lights out. Well, that has gone away. And do you have enough elsewhere to be able to carry your team, especially against good teams at this point in the season? Again, it's still TBD. So here on this podcast, when we're talking about team building, we're talking about the importance of having a young quarterback on a rookie contract. All that stuff is well and good. And having a great team, I think, puts you in a great spot. It gives you a very high floor. But can it take you over the top against some of these other teams that have elite quarterbacks, particularly when those elite quarterbacks have elite days, the way Josh Allen did the other day? What can you do now at this point other than shrug your shoulders and say, I'm not sure? I guess you could go the other way and say, you need the quarterback. You got to have that guy. Look at championship weekend last year. Brady, Rodgers, Mahomes, Allen. You have to have that guy. You can have a great defense. You can have great special teams. You can have a well-built, evenly spread out in terms of the talent kind of roster. You still need the elite guy. I'm not there quite yet. I'm not sure it's need, capital N, capital E, capital D. But boy, Josh Allen made it look that way on Sunday. So I just wanted to take a quick look back at what happened in that Bills game after we had Ty Dunn on last week. But right now, let's get to our guy, Jordan Reid, and let's talk some draft. All right, very excited to have with us now Jordan Reid, ESPN, one of their draft experts. He's working with Mel Kiper. He's working with Todd McShay. And Jordan, bowl season is upon us. The avalanche is coming for someone like you who is so heavily focused on the draft. That's why we really appreciate you spending some time with us here on Next Pats.
No problem, Phil. It's a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me as always.
Man, we have some really interesting situations happening here in New England because on the one hand, they have a young team in certain spots, right? You got Mac Jones, the quarterback. That position is squared away for years to come, we think. You look at some other spots on this roster. Kyle Duggar looks like he's a really good player, and he's going to be their strong safety of the future. Michael Wenu could be a staple on the offensive line. But they've also become a pretty old team in certain pockets as well. And there are certain contract situations here, Jordan, that we're starting to take a look at, whether it's J.C. Jackson going into a contract year this offseason. Maybe he gets franchise tagged. Maybe he doesn't. Juwan Bentley and Dante Hightower, those guys aren't under contract for next year. Trent Brown. So some really critical players on both sides of the ball. You don't know where they're going to be next year. So it's a great time for us, again, with these bowl games coming up, to look ahead and see if there's anybody we should really be focused in on if we're sitting at home on the couch watching these games. So knowing the Patriots as you do, and we all are pretty familiar with the Patriots under Bill Belichick at this point. He's just been there so damn long. But is there anybody that stands out to you, Jordan, as a classic Patriots type of fit as you've been studying the prospects in this year's class?
Yeah, there's quite a few. And, the Patriots have done a really good job of drafting as of late. I think they've gotten a lot of mileage, especially out of this past draft class, and not just Mac Jones. Christian Barmore has been absolutely phenomenal along the interior. And for him to be a second-round pick and just the reps that they have gotten and the production that they have gotten out of him, I don't think they could have asked of any more than what he's shown already. And then with him coming out and saying that he idolizes Richard Seymour, I think that got him a little bit of brownie points with the Patriots fan base for sure.
No doubt.
And then there's been plenty of other players that have come along really nicely as well. So I'm really interested to see how they continue to progress. But as far as some players who I think just scream New England Patriots, I actually had one in my latest mock draft back in the middle of November, and his name is Devin Lloyd. He's a linebacker from Utah, and he actually started off his career as a safety. But as he continued to get older, he transitioned to linebacker. He's actually playing Mike. I think he's probably going to be a Sam or a Will. I think he can play either one on the next level. But Devin Lloyd, he's a player. If you go back and watch the Pac-12 championship game against Oregon, he was all over the field. And I think linebacker is one position, maybe not in the first round. I think they could address maybe in the second or the third round. But if they have interest in addressing linebacker early, I think Devin Lloyd from Utah is one name to keep an eye on. He's going to be playing this upcoming Saturday against Ohio State. So a really good test for him.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And in that position, the way the Patriots have attacked it is fascinating because they typically, Jordan, they've gone old school on us, right? So they like the big, heavy thumper, Dante Hightower, Jawan Bentley. I mean, these guys were 260 in college. I know Lloyd is a little lighter. He's probably a little bit more athletic, but especially if you watch his Patriots-Bills game last week and you saw what Devin Singletary did to them underneath, athleticism at the second level could be a real attractive thing for Bill Belichick to add to his defense. Is he somebody who you think could get even a little bit bigger, having started his career at safety, or is that where he's best suited in terms of his body, is to be sort of in that like 235 range and just be somebody who can run all over the field and stay with some of these backs?
Yeah, the great thing about him is that I think he has capacity to gain maybe 10 plus more pounds. And then I think what's going to be really appealing to Bill Belichick is that the versatility. And if you think about some of the players, not even just linebackers, some of the safeties that they have drafted in years past, like a Kyle Duggar, who's transitioned to safety. He played a little bit of linebacker when he was coming out of Lenore Ryan before being a second round pick. So I think just the versatility that Devin Lloyd does have, I think is going to be very appealing to Bill Belichick.
That's a great name for us to keep an eye on. And like you said, great test against Ohio State coming up here. Let's talk about Bama just quickly, Jordan, because we know the connection there. Saban, Belichick, the program, I think, because it is so highly respected by Bill Belichick and because he understands the stress that these players go through, whether it's in practice, in game, off the field, that's what he wants his program to be like as well. There are so many similarities there. It's not just that he's friends with Nick Saban and he trusts his word. It's, okay, I understand you're going to be able to handle certain situations. And yeah, there are players from other programs who can too, but I have a better feel for how you will be able to do it because of what you went through at Bama. Is there anybody there on that roster that we'll watch this weekend that you say, okay, I could see him fitting in nicely with what Bill Belichick wants there?
Yeah, there's plenty. And there's two that I think would really that really scream New England Patriots to me. And the first one, he's an interior defensive lineman, and his name is Phidarian Mathis. He's one of the more experienced players along the Alabama defensive front end. He's not going to go as high as Barmore. I think he'll probably end up being a third or fourth round draft pick. But if you're looking for a player that I think can come in and be a day one starter as far as that nose tackle or that A-gap plugger that Bill Belichick has seeked in years past, whether it's Vince Wilfork or some of the other players that he has had in years past, I definitely think Phidarian Mathis could be one. And then another is Jordan Battle. He's a safety that is very battle-tested, for lack of better words. He's a versatile player on the back end, and he's really played his best ball down the back stretch of the year. He had an interception, a pick six against Mississippi State, and then he had another one in the SEC championship game in that big victory over Georgia. So Jordan Battle definitely could be another player that I think could be on the Patriots' radar.
Is Battle somebody who could play the post, Jordan? You know, Devin McCourty, who knows where he'll end up next year? He is technically under contract, but those are really void years on his contract. So we're not sure what McCourty's going to be doing in 2022. Is Battle somebody who could be sort of the next McCourty, who obviously didn't come to New England as a safety? He was a corner, but ended up being able to play in the middle because he's so smart and they love what he can do in terms of communication, all that sort of stuff. Is Battle that kind of player, or is he a little bit different type of safety?
So they use him traditionally as a one high, single high free safety, which is something that we have seen used routinely in Bill Belichick's defense. But the great thing about him is that he can come downhill and be a very reliable tackler and run support too. But if you go and listen to Bill Belichick when he talks about Jordan Battle, is he talks about just how smart he is. And he talks about always being in position. He's always where he's going to be supposed to be from time to time. And then he's the leader on the back end of the defense too. So I think we often hear the times culture with New England and then also Alabama. And I love this reference that Nick Saban uses, is that everybody can't play for the New York Yankees. And that's the recruiting pitch that he uses when he's talking to these 17 and 18-year-olds coming through the door. And Jordan Battle is that player that he's played every single snap since he's been on campus in Tuscaloosa. So he has plenty of reps and plenty of experience, but also he can play single high post safety, but he also can come down and strike you as a run supporter too.
Man, he sounds like a Patriot. between Alabama, versatile, smart, ton of experience down in Alabama. That's usually something they like. I know, for instance, Christian Barmore, it's not like he had a ton of snaps under his belt when he got to New England, but man, that you add all that stuff up. I'm also looking at his profile here on the Alabama page. St. Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah.
That place is an absolute factory. High school football. He's from the Fort Lauderdale area. James White went to St. Thomas Aquinas. So the Patriots are familiar, obviously, with those types of players. So Jordan Battle is a name we're going to have to keep an eye on. I have to run one name by you, Jordan, because I did do a mock draft myself. I am not nearly as apprised of these prospects as you are at this point in time, but I had the Patriots because they were at the time, they were the number 1 seed in the conference. I had them picking 31 in my mock draft, and I gave them Darian Kennard, the offensive lineman out of Kentucky. How crazy was I to do that? Jordan, is that way too early on Kennard? Is he even a tackle? That was my thinking sort of coming in, was you might not have Trent Brown. You might need a right tackle. He looks like a guy who's just sort of a mauler and mean and big and physical. Yeah. And so I liked him for all those reasons. But what can you tell us about Kennard, and is he even expected to go that high?
Yeah, I think with Kennard, he's a really interesting case. And the name Cody Ford comes up very frequently when talking about as far as his profile and his body type. And I know is that a good thing or a bad thing? AFC East. That's an opponent in the AFC East for you guys. But just talking about just the body type that he has, just the mean demeanor that he plays with too. And he's one of those players that you love to play behind if you're a running back, just because in my scouting report, I just wrote that he creates craters in the defense when he's run blocking. So he does need to improve as a pass blocker. I think that's an area of concern as far as entering the next level. But there's plenty of room for growth with him. And then he fits the profile of what the Patriots have seeked in years past. Outside of Isaiah Wynn, they really like those big body guys like you talked about when we were talking about linebackers. They like those big space eaters that they can just lean on these defensive linemen. So Darian Kennard definitely is a player. Once again, another one that went to a big-time high school up in Ohio. He actually took over for Liam Eichenberg at that right tackle spot in high school. So he's very battle-tested. He's played in plenty of big games in the SEC too. I think he's probably going to be that late first, early second-round pick. So you were right in the wheelhouse of where he's going to end up being projected to go.
All right, so even a blind squirrel finds a nut occasionally. Jordan, I appreciate that. The one position I did want to ask you, because of this J.C. Jackson situation, obviously Stephon Gilmore's been traded. There's all sorts of questions at corner. And even if they bring J.C. Jackson back on the franchise tag, who knows what his long-term future would be in New England. You might be needing a number 1 guy on the outside in 2023. And I don't know if you want to draft somebody high and make that, or make a rookie play that kind of role right off the bat. So is there anybody, maybe second half of the draft? We have no idea where the Patriots are going to end up, but we know they're in the playoff hunt. And so they're probably not going to be drafting 31, but they're going to be in that mid to late 20s range in all likelihood. Is there anybody down there in that range? And I know it's early, but that plays that corner spot that you think might end up being a pretty good fit for the Patriots. Know what they like to do. They played a little bit more zone this year, Jordan, but it still feels like they want to be a man-to-man defense.
So I'm going to stay with Alabama here, and he's not going to be playing in the college football playoff just because he suffered a foot injury a couple of weeks ago. But his name is Josh Jobe, and he's one of the more experienced players. He actually was the leader in the secondary ahead of Jordan Battle, not at safety, but as far as just experience in the secondary. He is going to be a 24-year-old rookie, so he is a little bit of an older player, but Nick Saban absolutely loves him. They experimented with him at safety prior to keeping him at cornerback, and he's one of those physical press man corners that also can play zone too. So keep an eye on Josh Jobe from Alabama. He's probably going to end up going in the 3rd or 4th round as long as the medicals clear out. But I think he's one player that definitely could appeal to the Patriots.
And we know it's not just the Saban connection, the culture, all that, although that matters. These guys will speak essentially Belichick's language by the time they get here in New England. I think that makes a huge difference, especially you're going to be asking him to play a real role right off the bat. Now, Jordan, I did have a sort of a big picture question for you, and it's about the quarterback spot, because we have a Patriots-Jaguars matchup lined up here. And those two teams, when you think about that battle team-wide, might not get that many people excited, but I think these two quarterbacks and how they've been treated and how they've been handled and how they've performed their rookie years really lends to an interesting discussion about what to look for in the quarterback position, how important coaching matters, especially early on for these quarterbacks. And you're a guy who played a lot of quarterback, North Carolina Central University. You started 3 years, so you understand this position. How do you explain the performance that we've seen from Mac Jones versus Trevor Lawrence, where one guy looks like he's a shoo-in for Rookie of the Year, and the other guy, who was supposed to be a generational prospect, looks like he's having a hard time just stringing positive plays together, Jordan? Is it all coaching? Is it all development? Was there something that went awry in the scouting process that we all missed on? Because Trevor Lawrence was number one for everybody.
Yeah.
How do you look at these two situations and make it make sense?
Well, coaching does matter. I mean, everybody can see that. We know the Patriots have top-notch coaching led by Bill Belichick, of course, but Josh McDaniels is a very experienced coordinator. He's been in plenty of big-time situations and then also has head coaching experience too. So I think Mac Jones went into a great situation. And I say this all the time with rookie quarterbacks. Sometimes it's great or better to be a mid to late first-round selection just because you go to a better team. And I use an I word a lot, and it's called infrastructure. And I said it when the Patriots went on an uncharacteristic spending spree in free agency, that Bill Belichick was probably going to target a rookie quarterback. And I think Mac Jones fit them the best from a profile standpoint, just because, and I hate using Tom Brady as far as a reference for Mac Jones, but as far as just talking about the style of quarterback, that he has won with in years past, I thought Mac really fit that to a T. So going back to my infrastructure point, I think it goes back to 3 Ps, and it's play callers, protection, and playmakers. If you don't have those 3, you're probably not going to get the best out of a rookie quarterback. And if you think of all the situations of all the 5 first-round picks around the league, I think Mac Jones has the best infrastructure of all 3 of those. And I still think they need to improve as far as the playmakers on the perimeter, but as far as the play caller and then the protection, I think he definitely has the best of all of those in Mac. I think an underrated trait about Mac coming out was that everybody kind of falls in love with the athletic guys that run around and, make those off-script plays. But Mac Jones was really special as far as his in the pocket type of movements and being able to navigate and create those new throwing windows, even when things weren't there. I think even though he's a below average athlete, I think he's so good as far as being a wizard within the pocket. He didn't necessarily have to win consistently outside of it. So I was really excited about Mac. I think he was being very underrated throughout the draft process, just because, once again, everybody falls in love with the off-script plays and then fantasy football as far as putting up those high numbers, even though Mac was able to do that, but it was a little bit more unconventional than what we saw from some of his counterparts. So I think he has a very bright future, but once again, you have to keep that infrastructure in place with him. And if you're able to do that, to keep all those things in place, I think you're going to get the best out of him.
Do you think that had Trevor Lawrence been drafted to New England, obviously that's, it was never going to happen, but because the 3 Ps are better here in New England than they are in Jacksonville, I mean, would this team be in a similar spot? Would they have 9 wins? Would they be looking at the playoffs? Or was Mac just more pro ready to be dropped into a situation like this, whereas you might be waiting a year or 2 before you get the best out of Trevor Lawrence?
I mean, obviously, Trevor Lawrence is more physically gifted than Mac Jones as far as athleticism and just playing the position overall. But where Mac was elite in is just the processing ability. And that's something that you saw even going back to his preseason games. The game just was never too fast for Mac, just because he has so much experience in the pro style type of offense when he was coming out of Alabama, and just being able to process, diagnose, and attack coverages. I think that's where Mac continues to be special in.
Who are you taking right now? If you had to win some games,
start
2022. Who are you taking?
I mean, I still would take Trevor Lawrence just because of the physical gifts. But as far as what we've seen so far, I think Mac is the clear answer.
All right. You're honest. I appreciate you answered the question, Jordan. You're about to be just absolutely inundated with draft questions, team building questions. You're going to be all over ESPN, ESPN Plus, I know, is where we can find your stuff as well. And if you're not following him already, dear listeners, at Jordan_Reid on Twitter, the guy's a tremendous follow. You will be learning all the time about a lot of these players. If you're like me and you don't get to watch as much college football as you would like during NFL season, you're going to learn a lot about these guys in the 2022 draft class. Jordan, thanks so much for being on with us on Next Pats, man. This was great.
No problem. Thanks as always, Phil. It was a pleasure.
Our great conversation there with Jordan. Tremendous insight. This guy is all over these prospects, so it's a great time for us to get him on before we're all plopped down on the couch for hours on end watching college football. If you're listening to this podcast right now, you might be watching a bowl game, because Lord knows there are bowl games going at all times starting the end of this week and through the weekend. The college football playoff is going to be particularly interesting, I know, for a lot of people, and great for Jordan to mention a couple of Alabama names, because let's face it, I mean, as long as we are fluent in Alabamese come draft season, odds are we're going to know at least one of the Patriots draft picks. Let's just put it that way. So whether it's one of these defensive linemen, whether it's Jordan Battle, who I had heard of, but I didn't know his game intimately. And for Jordan to come on here and say, you could play him at strong safety, you could play him at free safety, he's a good tackler, he has a ton of experience. Man, you add all those things up, plus the fact that he understands Nick Saban's defense, which has so many similarities to Bill Belichick's defense. They're going to speak the same language, Jordan Battle and his new teammates here in New England, if he gets drafted here. I think that could end up being a really, really good fit. So we have no idea where the Patriots will go come draft season, but nice for us to at least get the ball rolling as far as that goes now that bowl season is upon us. Nice to have that little quarterback conversation as well, because again, Jordan knows that position. He understands how important coaching is, how important situation is. We talk about this all the time, but he's right. You're better off going to a good team early in your career. You just have a better chance. In all likelihood, you have a better coach. You certainly have more stability there. Look at Trevor Lawrence and what he's dealing with right now. Just a joke of a situation under Urban Meyer. So that's what is welcoming him into the NFL. Now Meyer's gone. Now you're dealing with, a different situation. Next year, in this coming off season, you're going to be dealing with an entirely different situation. So you're really putting an incredibly talented player behind the eight ball to start his pro career and maybe doing irreparable harm to the guy because the situation around him stinks. Okay, it stinks. And there might be players who can overcome that type of situation. I think Andrew Luck, in all honesty, overcame a lot in Indianapolis. Did he have talent there? Yes, but they did not do a good job of building that team around him. I think part of the reason he's retired early is because they didn't do enough to protect him. One of those P's that Jordan's talking about. They didn't do enough to protect him under Ryan Grigson. The guy's getting injured all the time. And next thing you know, he ends up leaving the team because he doesn't want to deal with it anymore. So Trevor Lawrence is in a horrible situation. It's about as bad as it could get down there in Jacksonville. If you plopped him on this New England Patriots roster, would it look the same? No, it wouldn't. I don't think he's as accurate as Mac Jones, especially in that short area. And I think you would have to coach out of him some of the habits that maybe he had at Clemson, where he was encouraged to make the most of his athleticism, where he was encouraged to push the ball down the field, because that's what he's great at. He should be encouraged to do those things. But the Patriots offense, we know they want to get the ball out quickly. They want to get the ball into their playmakers' hands, and they want to let them go to work. They want to help their offensive line out. They want to help their running game out. They want to take care of the football. They want to be situationally sound. And I think Mac Jones was maybe more ready to do those things in year one for the Patriots than Trevor Lawrence would have been. And again, this is a ridiculous hypothetical. The Patriots were never getting Trevor Lawrence. But I also think that some of that stuff can be coached. What we call poise, and which I think is relatively and somewhat innate, I think also can be called coaching. Knowing what to do in a critical situation is not just you being able to do your breathing and be calm under pressure and have ice running through your veins, all these things we associate with quarterbacks once they come out of the womb. A lot of that is coaching. It's reps. It's what you do in practice. It's how you're taught on the field and off. And if you're Trevor Lawrence and you're not getting that, and you're Mac Jones and you are, yes, they're different players. Trevor Lawrence might not be as accurate in the short to intermediate area or as willing to get rid of the football quickly as Mac Jones, but he's certainly more athletic. He's certainly still an accurate quarterback. If he wasn't accurate, he wasn't ever going to be talked about in the ways that he was leading up to the 2021 draft as a generational prospect. He's an accurate passer, and he can throw the ball anywhere on the football field. He's also an extremely talented athlete. So where Mac Jones might win the Patriots a game or two, or not lose the Patriots a game or two because he's able to fit it into a tight window, Trevor Lawrence might be able to do the same if he's able to take care of the football in the same way and take to coaching in the same way that Mac Jones has. Trevor Lawrence might win you games or not lose you games in a little bit different way. Maybe he scrambles for a first down in a critical situation when the entire play has broken down. Maybe he's able to fit it into a tight window 18 yards down the sideline across the field and try a throw that Mac Jones never would because he doesn't necessarily have the same kind of arm to get the football there. I think it could work with Trevor Lawrence here in New England. Again, this is all ridiculous hypothetical, but we will be talking about all of this on our shows this week as we get closer and closer to Jaguars Patriots. And I think the conversation has just gone too far on Trevor Lawrence because he's having a bad season. I think looking at these two players is a great example of why situation matters and why years down the line, when we're talking about the Patriots potentially paying Mac Jones or not paying Mac Jones, we'll have a similar conversation. It'll be a little bit different slant on this conversation, but it will be similar in that, are you willing to make the situation worse around Mac Jones because you're desperate to pay him, because you want to make sure you keep him around, because that's what is going to happen. It's a professional sports league with a salary cap. If you decide to pay one player, usually means you have to decide not to pay a few others. So what are you willing to sacrifice in order to get the most out of your quarterback or hold on to a quarterback that you think is incredibly valuable? We'll get to those conversations. Again, those are years down the line, but it's all part of the same equation. What is the quarterback doing for you? What is the situation doing for the quarterback? Are you a quarterback that you can win with, or are you a quarterback that you can win because of? Mac Jones is certainly in the former category to me right now. You can win with him. Are you going to win, and especially win at a high level because of Mac Jones? Not yet, and that's fine because he's a rookie, and maybe he'll get there. But I think that's TBD. All right, that was a good time. Great conversation with Jordan Reid. Really like talking about this quarterback stuff. If you have thoughts on the quarterback conversation, leave them in the review section on our Apple iTunes page. You leave a comment there. You leave a question there. We're checking those all the time. We'll bring them up on the Next Pat's podcast. We have to get to a mailbag episode at some point in the near future here. I've said it multiple times, it feels like, over the course of the last few months, but we continue to have access to these great guests, and I want to get them on. I want them to talk to you and share what they know about this game, about this team, about the draft, about the team building process. I want them to be able to share that with you, but maybe we'll get to a mailbag in the very, very near future. Leave us a comment, Apple iTunes, leave us a rating, subscribe, tell your friends. Let's continue to grow the Next Pat's podcast as best we can so we can give you the best podcast humanly possible. Thanks again to everybody for listening this week, and enjoy the bowl games this weekend. We'll talk to you next week.